everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Chloe. I like to do reading, writing, and sometimes lifestyle vlogs, but today we are back for a book video that I've wanted to do for such a long time. I love watching tier ranking videos, and I finally had time to sit down and put together a list of all my 5-star reads, and today we are going to rank them, so I'm so excited. Let's get started. Alright, so first I want to kind of go over the categories I have, and just because I have a D tier doesn't mean they are any lesser. I do still love them just as much, probably. But first I have S tier, pried these from my cold dead hands. This is my Hall of Fame, my favorite books of all times, and that's just that. They are ones that have so far held up the test of time for me. Then my A tier is no notes, books that are perfect in every way possible, and I'm not going to hear anything about that. B, some notes. So books that probably wouldn't hold up if I read them again, so therefore I will not, or potentially some problematic things in there. Also C, I don't want to hear nothing about anything. That's more the problematic tier, that they're very flawed, but I loved nonetheless. And D, no thoughts, head empty. No thoughts, head empty. Books that I rated them 5 stars. Can't remember why. All right, let's get into it. So I'm gonna go in order of books from when I read them and I rated them 5 stars. There is a big gap from the books I read in high school to the books that I read kind of starting getting back into reading, just because I was originally not logging the books that I was reading. But we're back to it now, so there's going to be a few that kind of stand out at the beginning versus you'll kind of see. There we go. Sorry, I went out of focus. I won't be looking at my camera, so if I do go in and out of focus, I apologize for that. All right, so starting with my very first kind of all time romance book is Pride and Prejudice. I'm putting this in no notes because I love me some Pride and Prejudice. Literally, if you're one of my friends, you know I can't stop talking about it. And if you're one of my friends, you're probably questioning why it's an A tier, not S tier. You know, I love the general vibe of Pride and Prejudice, like the 2005 version. I know I've said this before, it's not fully accurate to the book. The series with Colin Firth is more accurate, but I just love the 2005 version so much better. But even the love story, itself, geez, can I talk? Anyways, it is kind of the OG enemies to lovers and the misunderstanding trope. Love it with all my heart. But there is one of Jane Austen's books that takes precedent over Pride and Prejudice, and that is, where is it at? There it is. That is Persuasion by Jane Austen. And whereas Pride and Prejudice is the enemies to lovers, Persuasion is like original second chance romance trope that normally that's not my vibe. Normally I don't like a second chance romance, but there's just something about like the angst and the yearning and both of the characters growing in this one that there's something about Persuasion that just does it so much more for me than the book Pride and Prejudice does. And with Persuasion, there's a really good 1995 adaptation that I love so much, but I will not be discussing the Dakota Johnson version. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear about that. I don't want anyone to bring that to my attention. Okay, so moving on to a book that I loved in high school. I was on Tumblr every waking moment, so this probably should not be a surprise to people. But that is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and that is going in some notes. So, some notes because why was a 16-year-old girl saying that this was her favorite book? I have yet to reread it since then. Maybe I should, do a little bit of a reread of this. But also, I do remember that I feel like there was a slur in this one, and she was a little bit racist in it, if I'm thinking correctly. I'm gonna fact check myself on that, but that's something I vaguely remember reading and being like, ooh, interesting, but it was so quick that I moved on from it. But so that's why it's in some notes. I don't think I should have loved this as much as the 16-year-old girl as I did. And, you know, would it hold up if I read it again? Who knows? On a very, very similar vein to that, probably when I was a sophomore in high school. Oh, also I want to say all of these covers that I put in I tried to get all the covers of my books that I currently have in my library. Like the ones that I owned or the ones that I read, because that feels more personal to me. And I'm saying that because, similar vein to the bell jar, my next favorite book when I was a sophomore in high school and 16 years old was The Virgin Suicides. And I loved this cover so much. I borrowed a copy from my sophomore year English teacher, and I reread it quite a few times, and I carried it with me as like a 16-year-old, and in the end he was like, hey, you can have that. And I was like, oh my god, what a sweet gift. And he was probably like, this girl, I don't want to deal with whatever is happening with her right now, so she can just have the book. And it is currently on my shelf, 3 books down from my copy of The Bell Jar. So again, why was I so into this as a 16-year-old girl? Actually, it makes perfect sense that I was very into this as a 16-year-old girl, but you know, some notes about that one. Next one is Just Like Heaven by Julia Quinn. And you will notice that there are 3 Julia Quinn novels on here, and I thought about taking them off, but with them on, it was a nice even 25. And my love of a nice even number overranked my why do I have these on here, because I did rank these 5 stars at one point in time. And the reason why this is No Thoughts Head Empty is because I genuinely cannot remember what happened in this book. I don't remember the main characters. I don't remember their names. I just remember that I went through a phase after the first season of Bridgerton was released where I binged all the Bridgerton series. And then I tried to read another book, and it was so heavy that I was like, I need something fun. So I read the entire Smith-Smythe quartet by Julia Quinn. Liked that better than Bridgerton. I want to put that out there. But then I ended up reading her Rokesby series too, and I liked those all better than Bridgerton. But again, I'm putting this on here. This was, I believe, the first book in the Smith-Smythe quartet. I just simply don't remember what happened. So that's why it's in No Thoughts Head Empty. Thank you very much. Next one is, where's she at? It's In His Kiss. This is one of the other Julia Quinn novels. You can see I kind of read them all around the same time. It's In His Kiss was the one between, I want to say, Hyacinth and Gareth. Hate that name, by the way. Hate that name. And if you've read that book, you know at the end when she's like, yes, Gareth, girl, get out of here. But I think this is my favorite out of the Bridgerton series. I just liked it, like a fun little heist, and then like the scene where basically they have to hide and he like presses her into the closet and you're like, oh my god. And I loved Lady Danbury's role in this one because I had already seen the first season of Bridgerton before I had read all these, and it makes me really hopeful that they'll get to Hyacinth's season, though I do understand that they'll probably need to recast the current Hyacinth, which on one hand is really sad because I think she's so cute and great in the role, but you know, it's that whole thing of you don't want to watch a girl grow up, you know, and then perform spicy scenes. So, but I did really like that one. Next one is, so next is A Touch of Darkness, and I feel like I'm gonna put it in some notes because I do genuinely think, so first of all, this is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and I believe I read this during COVID after I had kind of restarted reading that webtoon Lore Olympus. If you know, you know. And Hades and Persephone retellings were really popular for a really long time. And so I bought this. It was a Christmas present. Actually, I usually pick out a few books a year and my family will just buy them for me. So this was a Christmas present. And I remember being really into it. I do love like when they make like Hades like a protector of Persephone, but then Persephone still like, you know, stands her ground, and it's a modern retelling kind of. It's like modern, but also like kind of magical realism, I guess. Anyways, I'm putting this in some notes because I did not read the rest of the series that was in it because I didn't have time, right? And I am probably going to be sending my copy to a friend for her to have because she likes these types of books and I recommended them to her. And I feel like if I'm going to recommend a book to a person, I need to provide that book. You know, like I can't expect someone to go out of their way to like go to the library and rent it or like purchase it if it's something I really, really, really want them to read. So I'm going to be sending my current copy. Yes, right over there. Sorry. I'm going to be sending my current copy to a friend pretty soon. So I think if I reread it or read the rest of the series, it might not hold up. But I remember being spicy. If y'all like some spicy stuff, that's spicy. All right, next I Capture the Castle and by Dodie Smith. And I remember really enjoying this book because it put me through such a course of emotions of first I was upset at the main character for some choices she made. I was upset at her sister for the choices she made. I was upset with the men in their lives and the choices that they made. And just like, it's such like a sad situation that happens where basically like this young girl, I can't remember her name, she lives in this kind of decrepit, rundown house that ends up, you know, it's her sister, and her parents, I want to say, and then they also have a farmhand who's in love with the main character, who he becomes like a muse for an artist or something, and he offers the main character like he asks for her hand in marriage and she says no, but then also these two Americans come by who I believe they own the house they live in or they're neighbors or something. See, this is why I think I had to put in No Thoughts Head Empty because I can't really remember the plot, but I just remember that the sister ends up making this choice at the end where it's like you can't be mad at her because she really makes it for love, but she hurts so many other people in the process. But then I remember the main character like takes a stand at the end that she would not have made in the beginning, and it's such like a beautiful character growth. And so I'm struggling between, I think, No Thoughts Head Empty because I need to reread it. That's what I'll say. I'll need to reread it because just giving that kind of synopsis to you guys made me realize why I thought it was such a good book in the first place. So I think I need to take another look at it. Next, I have Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh. I don't know if it's Moshfegh. I've heard that I've been pronouncing it wrong, but this is going in no notes. I loved this book so much. I went through a phase of hers where I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, Eileen, and then I want to say there was another one that I read, and My Year of Rest and Relaxation I think just fell very flat for me, especially that shock factor ending. Like, what was that? Anyways, but I remember just kind of being like, oh, like, I don't know if I see the hype, and reading a lot of like literary fiction at the time. Like, I think I also read Pew by Catherine Lacey around the time I read this, and then just kind of feeling like, you know, maybe lit fic was not the genre for me, which I think I'm still slowly trying to get that into my brain. But then I read Eileen and I remember loving it so much, like the shock twist in the middle of it, and just I felt like Eileen was such like a real character of like a girl who's stuck in like her dead end hometown and a dead end job, and just like having dreams of being so much more, but then also dealing with the cards she was dealt, and then too much happening, you know what I mean? But I am putting it in no notes. I saw last night when I was kind of downloading these pictures to make this board that there's a movie, and I think like Anne Hathaway might be in it. So I think that might be what I do tonight. I think I might watch that. The next one that is in this is gonna get me a few laughs because yes, it is published fan fiction of Pride and Prejudice. You guys can probably kind of see a theme about the books that I like. Like I love Regency romance, and I love, you know, like romance from Jane Austen's time. And so the Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow is going right up here in no notes. Come back. There we go. I love Mary Bennet because I think she is so misunderstood, and it's so especially obvious to me in the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice is that she would have been so perfect for Mr. Collins, and the fact that like nobody could see that and they all overlooked her even though she was the perfect choice just really made me feel like she's so misunderstood compared to her sisters, and how she has to fade into the background just because of like who her sisters are. And I just love this. It looks at Mary, you know, after all of her sisters move out and she's living with her parents, and then she's kind of like taking on one of those like Charlotte Lucas, like, you know, like I'm 27, no prospects, and I'm frightened, and she has her own version of that where she's basically being tossed from family member to family member to try to find someone who will take her in. This is also after the death of Mr. Bennet. And so it's just her kind of trying to find her way in life, find her confidence, and then she gets a happy ending. And it's so cute and so sweet. So I really like that one. And I looked it up. Well, when I was looking this up, I found that they're making a video or making a series about it. And it's so funny. It said filming in early 2025, and I was like, oh my god, that's so long from now. Girl, it is early 2025. Goodness gracious. I don't know what year it is half the time, I'll be honest. The next one I have on my list is You'll All Grow Up and Leave Me by Piper Weiss. And this is kind of a coming of age memoir that intersects with the real life story of Gary Walensky, a tennis coach who killed himself after he unsuccessfully tried to kidnap one of his tennis prodigies. And this is told from Piper Weiss's point of view because she was one of Gary's girls where she took lessons from him, and basically it's that situation where, you know, you get some male attention from a man that you think he's supposed to protect you. He's supposed to show you, you know, kind of your way in the world by like teaching you this skill. And instead it also kind of showed about how he was masking from a lot of people and how he was already on his fall to grace, but he was so good at masking it that people like were drawn to his energy, kind of, or mostly young girls were drawn to his energy. And I have it in some notes because I recently thought of the ethics, maybe that's not the right word, of rating memoirs and biographies with a star rating system, because the reason this is on here is because I rated it 5 stars. But I started to question, like, who am I to rate someone's trauma on a star system? You know what I mean? But as of right now, this is still on here, but that's why it is on some notes. Where would it still hold up to me if now I am in this stage of my life where I don't think I should be rating people's trauma? Basically, that's the whole gist of it. Next is I Am Thinking of Ending Things. And this is by, I want to say, Ian Reid. Yep, that's who it's by. I will warn you, if you look this book up, you will need to add book after you say I'm thinking of ending things, or else Google is going to be real worried about you. I'll just give you that warning because they were worried about me and giving me helplines, which that's very nice of them to do. But I was like, oh, whoa. I'm good. I'm just looking for a book. But I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I remember reading this in such like, I sat down and I think I read it for like 8 hours straight. And that's how you need to consume this book. If you start and stop, you're gonna forget. You're going to not be immersed in this crazy loop of what happens. And I don't even want to spoil anything because it gets so crazy. But basically how it starts is it starts with the main girl, and she's with her boyfriend, and they are on the way to his childhood home for her to go meet his parents for dinner. And they, you know, after dinner, weird things happen kind of during dinner. They leave, and even crazier happens when they have to stop at an old school for some reason, right? That's all I really want to say, because I remember just being this book being so trippy and just being like, what is happening? But at the end, it was so good, and you're just like, and I know that there's also a movie of this, and I tried to watch it, I want to say. I think it was on Netflix, but I didn't have the time to devote to sit down and watch it all the way through, so I didn't. I'll be honest. So maybe I'll give that one another shot as well. Now, some of you might have noticed that, yes, indeed, there are 2 published Pride and Prejudice fan fictions on here, and you know what? I'm not upset about it. I'm not mad about it. And I'm gonna just go ahead and take Unequal Affections and put, I don't wanna hear nothing about anything. I don't wanna hear about how this is one of my 5-star books. 2 of the published fan fictions from Pride and Prejudice are on my 5-star list. But you know, I know what I like. I knew going into these, or I had on very good authority, that I was going to love them. The other Bennett sister, I wanna say, was recommended to me, but Unequal Affections I found after I had read the other Bennett sister and needed more. So I looked it up. And this is basically the thought, what if Elizabeth had said yes to Darcy the first time he proposed? So then she kind of finds out about the whole Wickham thing after she's already with Darcy. And there's like a very good scene where, one thing I feel like the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice doesn't do very well is showing how scummy Wickham actually is. Because I think that Wickham is the most attractive, but I think the Wickham from this 2005 series, from the 1995 series, does better at showing how he's such a sleazeball. But I think there's a very good scene where, you know, Lizzie defends Darcy to Wickham, and then, you know, Wickham really shows more of his true colors to her, which I think would have made the 2005 version, and even like the book too, the confrontation they have is so good that I really enjoy it. I really love, I loved this experiment of like what would have happened if she had said yes the first time and she didn't need the second chance with him, but it was good. And I will not be hearing anything about having published fanfiction on this list. Thank you and good night. All right, next I have Malibu Rising. And this is gonna go in some notes. And I loved it. I loved the story of it. It's basically about these 4 siblings who all became famous because their dad was a famous singer. And it jumps back and forth between kind of how their parents met to them in modern day, where the main character, the oldest sister, is kind of going through a divorce. But it's also all happening on the night where she's throwing this very famous, I want to say, New Year's party. That's, you know, celebrities go, like it gets a lot of press, and so all the modern day stuff happens on one night. Meanwhile, it's jumping back and forth between their childhoods, their trauma with growing up with a rich father and famous father who leaves them, and then their struggling mother. And then also I just think the interactions between the siblings is so good, and I don't know how to really put into words why I love this so much. I think that's why it's going into some notes where I think I was in such a good place in my life that I was just like, the ending felt so like hopeful to me that this is unpopular, but I struggle with Taylor Jenkins Reid books. And I think this was the first one of hers that I liked, and so I would be afraid to read it again in the way that I think I might start nitpicking it and not like it as much. But also, spoiler for a second, don't listen to this part if you want to read this. But I thought at the time, I really liked at the end that there was the reveal that the girl that was wandering around the party, that you kind of got a little of her point of view, was a 5th sibling. because I was like, oh, like this poor girl has been just searching for her family this whole time, and she knows like who they are, but they have no idea about her, and now they're finally like kind of coming together. But I think I suspended disbelief a little too much for that one, and now I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if I like that choice at the end. But anyways, moving on. All right, spoilers, done. Okay. The next is the third and final of The Secrets of Sir Richard Kenworthy. It's going in No Thoughts, Head Empty again, because this is one of the Smith-Smythe Quartet. So obviously I really liked that whole series, but I read all 4 of them in one go, and they kind of melted together with one another. And it's just the same thing where it's like, you know, man comes, saves girl and damsel in distress, and I eat it up every time. It is such a good read. And this is not saying, obviously, again, this is like my 5-star books. Probably, you know, maybe it could go in some notes where if I reread it, I wouldn't like it as much and it would drop off of this list. So maybe it should go in some notes, or I don't want to hear nothing about anything, because I will say some of Julia Quinn's like novels, like obviously it was set in Regency England where like all the men are kind of like headstrong, like manly, low-key misogynist, but you know, I like what I like, and it's always a really good read, you know? So that's why I'm going No Thoughts, Head Empty, because I can't really remember what happened, but I did love it, and I know that. All right, we're already on 16. That's kind of crazy. The next one, it pains me to put this in here. Oh, actually, wait, I don't know if I should have this one here. Now I'm kind of debating if it's in I Don't Want to Hear Nothing About Anything or No Thoughts, Head Empty. Because on one hand, it's pretty flawed with the misogynistic stuff, and it's pretty much the same story as all of her others. But I also don't remember it that well. I'm putting it in I Don't Want to Hear Nothing About Anything. There you go. That's where she is. That's where she lives now. That's where she goes. All right, next one, and I moved it because this one kind of pains me, but I'm putting Clara and the Sun in No Thoughts. Why does that keep happening? Sorry, my camera's not good at focusing for some reason, but I'm putting Clara and the Sun in No Thoughts, Head Empty, because the only thing I remember is that I really, really, really like the ending. And sometimes a chapter at the end can turn around an entire story for me. Like with Clara and the Sun, I remember just being okay, and there was something about the last chapter that I loved so much, but I can't remember what, which is why it's in this tier, that really bumped it up to 5 stars for me. Meanwhile, there's another book I read, I actually have it right next to me, it's called Rest and Be Thankful by Emma Glass, and I remember just being so viscerally affected by the last chapter that it dropped it like a whole star rating for me. So that's why Clara and the Sun's going here. Another thing is that, as with a few other of these on here, there is a movie adaptation coming out. I don't know if it's already out, but I think I would definitely give that a try to watch. But right now, No Thoughts, Head Simply Empty. But we have now finally moved on to another S tier, and that is Beartown. You can pry that book from my cold dead hands. I saw a critique about it saying that, you know, what's his name, Frederick Bachman? Yeah, that his writing is too sentimental, but I don't care. It was so beautifully written to me. So it's basically a story that takes place in, I want to say Sweden, it's some Nordic country, that it's a very small town and everything kind of focuses on hockey. And they have a star player, I believe his name is Kevin, and he basically does something very messed up, and the town kind of fractions into the people on his side and the people that are not on his side, and it just kind of shows like male privilege, you know. And then there's like his best friend, like, and his dynamic, how it changes afterwards, and then the poor girl that this thing happens to, like how her life changes. It's so to me, it's beautifully written. And I love that every chapter, like, you get point of views from the most useless characters in a way that, like, you're like, at first you're like, well, why am I reading about this one person like one time? But I feel like it gives just such a cool insight into the small town and like the energy and how they're all intertwined. I loved it so much. But this might be controversial to some people. I think I've said that like twice already this video, but I have not read the rest of this series because the first book was so perfect to me that I can't imagine, like, I don't want to read the second and third book because I've heard they're just okay, and I don't want to ruin how perfect this book was in my mind. So I won't. So I'm not gonna. So Beartown, pry it from my cold dead hands. All right, the next book is My Annihilation, and she's going in the I don't want to hear nothing about anything. Something I find, you know, if you're on this channel a lot, you will see that I read a lot of like translated Japanese literature, and I feel like sometimes that reading something that was originally in another language kind of just hinders interpretation and understanding of it. But something I find in Japanese literature all the time is that there's something, maybe it's just the books that I'm being recommended and the books that I'm reading, it probably is, that the main female character is always just a sexual object in the man's eyes, even if he loves her, and she's always crazy in some way. Like, I've read Norwegian Wood, that's another one. Then there's like one called like I want to say it's called The Secret Life of Miyoko something. I'll put it in here. But then this one, I feel like I find in most places, all Japanese literature that I read, even I Captured the Castle, like, it wasn't as, that was not it. Even in Lonely Castle in the Mirror, there's just something wrong with the female main character, like, kind of mentally. And I want to read about happy stuff. And I think, again, it's just that I'm being recommended certain things. But I just remember this is also one of those ones that it was a very quick read. I think I read it in a span of, I read it on a 2-hour road trip. So 2 hours there, 2 hours back. I finished it on the road trip. And it is, again, I think you have to sit through and finish this. It's very circular, but I think that that is my main complaint, is that I'm just seeing too much. After, this was probably the first of the series of those that I read, and after reading like at least 4, where it's just like all of the female character is an object of sexual desire who has a mental illness, that I'm a little done with it. I'm a little done with that. All right. We are going strong with another S tier book of The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio. And I just needed to look up like this story again, just to remember that it is supposed to be a feminist retelling of an old Korean fairy tale. I didn't want to get that mixed up, so that's why I looked that up. But I remember reading this on a day, I think it was like my last semester of grad school, and we had like a cancellation. It was like a snow day or something, or our classes were canceled, and I needed to be productive, and instead I sat in my bed for 8 hours and I read this book. It was so beautifully written. It's like about this girl who basically, there's a curse where every year, I want to say, or every few years, they have to sacrifice a bride to the sea god so that their village will be protected from, you know, natural disasters. And the girl who's supposed to go is her brother's girlfriend, and the brother kind of steals away on the ship to protect the girlfriend when the sea god comes, and Mina, the main character, knows he's gonna do this, so to protect him, she goes and throws herself in the place of this girl. And the thing is that like her brother's girlfriend is beautiful, like that's the thing they always send the most beautiful, kind, smart girl to hopefully like satiate the sea god. But instead they get Mina, who's apparently none of that, and it's just her adventure through like the god's realm. And there's a huge, like the red string of fate is such a huge part of this, and I have a tattoo that I got like years and years ago, but it's like kind of symbolizing a similar concept. And I just remember thinking, I was like so enamored with the book. It was so good. I read it on Kindle because I rented it from Libby. Immediately purchased it afterwards. I didn't even write it down on my list. I like to keep a list of books I want to read so that I only read the books, or I only purchase the books I really liked. This was an immediate purchase. Immediate. It was so good. I loved it so much, and that is why it is an S tier. And I would read this again. I've actually thought about rereading it quite a few times. The next one is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And that is going in no notes. And another thing I struggle with is I think I let hype get to me on social media. So sometimes like there are books that are super, super popular, and if I read them, I really don't like them. And so I'm like, part of me feels prejudiced against really popular books. And that's why I was really scared for a really long time to read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. All I'm gonna say about it, so what if I was rooting for her and the demon? What would you say? What would you say about that? It was so heartbreaking in so many ways. And I just wanted her and that stupid demon to like work out. Cause even the end, like the very final like chapter that I'm like, and she's like, I'm gonna break his heart just as much as he broke mine. And I'm like, y'all are obsessed with each other. Like I found it so hard to care about the human guy who could finally remember her. I really did. I found it real hard. And I think that's like a fundamental flaw for me. And that's why there's no notes, because I interpreted it the way I wanted to interpret it, and it's probably so different than others' interpretations, but I don't want to hear it. I do not want to hear it. Oh, we are on an absolute roll because I am moving up my favorite Ali Hazelwood book, Love Theoretically. And I've read, at this point, 4 Ali Hazelwood books. I've read The Love Hypothesis, where all of Ali Hazelwood books are standalones, but I do think you need to read The Love Hypothesis first, just because the way that, like, you know, people come in and out of the story, it is, you know, set in the real world, and because they're all in academia, they overlap with each other. I think that The Love Hypothesis you need to read before you read Love Theoretically. But I've also read Bride, I've read Love on the Brain, not Love on the Brain, that's the one I wanted to read next. I just added that to my TBR today. But I've read Not in Love, and Love Theoretically is just my favorite. I love Jack so much. And the scene with his brother where then he's like finding out the reason why. So the whole thing is that Elsie she makes extra money to fake date or buy fake dating people, where she works for an app that she'll be your date to like a work party, she'll meet your parents, like she'll pretend that she's your girlfriend for money, because she's like an adjunct professor who makes like no money and she's not tenured, so she's trying to get a position where she can actually have health insurance because she has diabetes and she can barely afford some of her like stuff sometimes. Meanwhile, Jack is basically her enemy, because not only is he the brother of one of her best clients, but he's also actively standing in her way of getting the tenured position that she really wants. And there's such like a cringy like scene where like she runs away from him. It also takes place in Boston, and if you didn't know, I live in Boston, and that's why I think I loved it extra, because I just feel like these could be random people that are on the street, and like there's scenes that happen that I'm like, I can envision that happening right here on this street corner in this neighborhood. Oh, it's so good. But I just think it's her best work. But I've seen a lot of people saying that Love on the Brain is better, but I don't know. I will be reading it soon. I just have too much to say about Love Theoretically, so I'm just gonna put it in the private for my cold dead hands and tell you to go read it. Next is Fantastic Land. I'm saying no notes on this one because I can't give notes on it. It is so good. It's one of those ones that I will never read again because it was such a hard read for me, but I will recommend to everybody. And I've said that in the last, I think, 3 books that the 3 videos I've made talking about this book, where it was just the way it was written in kind of interview style, retelling, putting the pieces together. We're basically this like Disneyland-esque park, right? Is a hurricane hits it and it has a skeleton crew of people who agreed to stay behind, didn't leave, right? And people think like the Coast Guard doesn't come to get them because they're like, oh, they have a protocol in place, they're gonna be fine, so they don't come get them for a few weeks, but shit hits the fan horribly. And it's just kind of the recounting from like police tapes and interviews afterwards from like the person who's like supposed to be kind of like writing this story, because it's not found footage type thing, but it's basically about a journalist who's going around interviewing these people about this event that happened. So good. It's, like I said, it's a really hard read, and if you've read it before, I at least like every few weeks I'll think about the warthogs again, and I'm haunted by it. It's very good. I don't even know what to say about this one, truly, that has not been said by my past videos. Pry this series from my cold dead hands. Quite truly, there was so much angst, there was so much longing. It was I love a good slow burn. This slow burn was multiple books. I need that in my life. Like, that's what I want. I want the slow burn. And I can't waste, it's not wasted breath to talk about this series, but I can't waste any more of your guys' time by screaming about Thrown in the Dark. But I will. Okay, I need to. So basically it's about Amma and Damien, and they go on this journey where Amma basically accidentally takes something of Damien's and now it's stuck in her body. And Damien's like, okay, well, you're coming with me and I'm gonna kill you when we get to our destination because I need what's inside of you, and the only way to get it out is for you to die, right? And it's this whole villain's journey between the two of them, and Amma has such great character development. And again, the angst, the longing, it's so good that I've been reading some really good books recently. That's what I will say. I've been really getting back into kind of like the fantasy genre, which scared me away for a really long time. But I'm back. I'm better than ever. This series, I cannot recommend it enough. And if you want to see me talk about it more or like scream about it more, I think I've talked about it in my last like 2 videos. All right, I have to be quick through these last 2 because my camera is indeed dying. But the last 2 I have are Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. And I don't want to hear nothing about anything about this book. And that is because I think I love this book so much because it's kind of about these 2 best friends who one of them is famous and successful writer, and she kind of goes to this seaside town to kind of be away from everything because she struggled with her success, and she spent a few times in like the hospital because of her mental health. And then her best friend, who is having like kind of a better, happier life, but she's also unhappy, like feeling very stagnant where she is and where she lives. And it's just about like the relationship with these 2 guys, and it feels very much like a friendship that's run its course, and that's how you feel at the beginning, and they're fighting, but it's all very real arguments that are uncomfortable to read about, but it's like, it really does feel like arguments you could have with your best friend. And I remember there's a scene where they're fighting, and Eileen, one of the best friends, can hear her friends having fun, and even though she's upset, she goes down and they're fighting, and she asks if she can join them, and they say yes, and then they're fine for a minute, and then they start fighting again, and she's like, I've really messed it up. And it's so real. And I think a reason why I've read criticisms about this is because the end feels slightly too happy in the way that so the couples end up together at the end, and I'm like kicking myself for not remembering who Eileen ends up with. Pause. I'm back. Okay. It's Simon. I don't know why I could not remember Simon's name. But, you know, Eileen and Simon end up together after like years and years of would they, won't they, or will they, won't they, where it really feels like Eileen doesn't deserve Simon because Simon's just been waiting for her and he realizes he can't wait forever, and then they fight and it's this whole thing and he's like, you can't, like, I can't be here just when you want me. And then in a way you want him to walk away, but I also just really love a happy ending, and I wanted a happy ending so badly that I lowered my expectations. So when I got the happy ending, I was like blown away. I was like, oh my god, it actually happened. They actually got a happy ending. And I think the criticism is that at the end, spoiler, well, this is all spoilers. I don't know, I'm saying spoiler now. Don't watch this video if you weren't expecting spoilers. But like Eileen ends up pregnant at the end, and I think there's a lot of hate in the book community for an unexpected pregnancy trope. I like it. I'm not mad about an unexpected pregnancy trope. I feel like if it's handled well, but I usually find it's always the only one that I didn't like when there was an unexpected pregnancy was, I can't remember what book it was, but it was some Regency novel where basically like they're not supposed to like be together because they're not married, and then they're like just boyfriend and girlfriend in this Regency time, and then the guy gets like really, really mad at her and doesn't talk to her even though she's like pregnant with his kid. And I hated that. That was an unexpected pregnancy trip that I hated. But when it ends out best case scenario, that's when I like it, you know? And finally, blissfully, the last one that we will be talking about today is a new entry with the Foxhole Court. And I'm gonna put this in, I don't want to hear nothing about anything. I don't want to hear nothing about anything. So I know this is my C tier, and that's like feels pretty low for how deeply in love I am with this series. This also encapsulates the whole series. I'm currently filming a video right now where I'm reading all of them. I'm on book 3, and genuinely I think about this series day in, day out. I think about it when I'm sleeping. I've had a dream about it, and I think about it when I wake up. And that is how invested in my life I've gotten, and I'm a 25-year-old woman. I should not be that into this series, but I very unfortunately am. So I can't in good faith recommend this to you. Like, it is objectively a horrible concept. Horrible things happen. If you're even thinking about reading this book, you need to check the trigger warnings. You need to check the trigger warnings on all the books, because I just finished the second book. Boy, was that rough. But I think if I had read this book series in high school, it would have altered the course of my life. And that's why I don't want to hear any criticisms. I don't want to hear anything. And I think a lot of people who read the series feel the exact same way about it. And, you know, I feel like she should be at the top. But I have 2 more books in the series to read, and I know it's gonna have a place in my heart for a really long time, and I'll be purchasing the series in print to have, but right now, I don't want to hear anyone's criticisms about it. It's flawed. The writing may not be the best, but it is so good to me. And alright, thank you so much for watching this very rambly video. I know I didn't give a lot of time to like telling the plots of these stories, meanwhile with others I did, and I'm still kind of getting used to formulating my thoughts in a way that's more digestible rather than just kind of screaming at the camera, which this was a little bit. But I hope you enjoyed, and if you like watching me ramble on about books, please like, comment, subscribe, and stick around for the other videos like this that I'm gonna do in the future. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.